thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays, over Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Hey, thanks, Chris. So my name is Matt McClelland. I am the VP of Sustainability and Innovation for a company called Covenant Logistics. We are a third-party logistics provider, but mostly a trucking company. We have about 3,000 trucks. We drive all over the country. And it may not sound like a very interesting, dynamic business, but as I'm sure we'll get into a little bit, it really is. And I'll say one last thing. My title is a little bit of a mouthful, I know. I have what I call the most dangerous job at the company, because if times get tough and we have to start cutting non-essential people, even though I am a VP, I have nothing to do with day-to-day operations. My job is all about the future. Appropriately, I'm on your.
That's right. When times hit, when we hit rough times, people stop thinking about the future, which is exact opposite of what they should be doing. But go on.
Exactly. Yeah. So I get worried that something's going to happen, and I would basically say that when I'd be doing presentations to customers. Our CEO finally said, "Matt, you got to stop doing that, because the work that you do for us, helping us think about strategy, helping us think about our roadmap that's 2, 3, 4, even 10 years out, is something that is absolutely critical. You can't say that anymore. If you do, you will get let go much quicker."
I love that. I love that tactic, though. I love that tactic because it sort of puts them on the spot. See, I told you. I told you this is going to happen. I love it.
So yeah, that's a little bit about my role, and I can tell you a little bit more about it.
Awesome. So you think about logistics. I mean, logistics is a huge deal, right? I mean, people think it's very boring, but it's insanely important, especially nowadays, especially since COVID, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of stuff to logistics, but when you hear the word, I think most people's minds sort of like immediately blank out, going, "Oh, that's so boring." So tell us how exciting it actually is.
Chris, it's funny, my wife's a doctor, and, I think her job is really, really, really exciting when I listen to all the lives she saves and babies she delivers and things that she does. But, she'll tell me that, when she has to describe what I do for a living to her friends, she's like, "I don't know, something with trucks." It's a lot more complicated. It gets made in another country. It gets put on a ship. It comes into a port. It gets put on a truck. It goes to a warehouse. It gets picked up by another truck. It goes probably to another warehouse. Then it goes to a store where you come in and pick it up off the shelf and take it to your house. And all of the things involved with making that happen is what logistics is all about. And so different companies like Covenant, we play a different role in that process. We don't do anything on the shipping side, but we do move product from, there's something in your hand, in your house, on your body right now that was on a truck, and it may have been delivered by us. So it is really exciting. There's a lot of technology, as we'll probably talk about in a little bit. There's a lot happening. In fact, when I talk to young kids in college, they're asking for advice. What sort of things do you think are marketable right now? What sort of industries are exciting? Where do you see potential for everything, for challenge to money to satisfaction? I have no problem sending them into the logistics, the supply chain world.
What's funny is that if it wasn't for you, civilization would collapse. We wouldn't be able to have the civilization we have today if it wasn't for logistics or companies in the background, making sure that everything's running smoothly, right? If you ask me, it's the foundation of everything.
Well, and when you think about the expectations as consumers, we've gotten used to the fact that we can order something online and it shows up. Well, if you're in a place like where you are in San Jose, you probably get it in 24 hours or less. If you're where I am in Chattanooga, Tennessee, it might take a day or two. I mean, just what happens in the background for that to happen is really unbelievable. We probably don't have enough time to even begin to talk about what that is, but we can certainly talk about some of the technologies and where the future of some of that's going, Chris, because I think there is some real exciting stuff, everything from autonomous trucks to battery electric and hydrogen trucks. We talk about the environment and what's called the decarbonization of freight. There's automation in the warehouse. There's software visibility. There's optimization software. In fact, I go on a ski trip every year with a bunch of private equity guys. I'm the only person out of 27 that has nothing to do with the financial industry. These guys pick my brain nonstop for startup deal flow in the logistics space. That's where they want to invest their money. That's where they see a lot of activity. That's where they see a lot of potential. So it's an exciting place to be.
So when you talk about logistics, it's also talking about moving people, not just moving stuff, right? Or are you talking about mostly moving stuff?
Mostly moving stuff. Moving people is I'll leave that up to Delta and the major airlines.
So, tell us a little bit about something that's interesting in the space that you think people don't understand, that they don't get, that they think is super boring.
So, gosh, where do you even start with that? There's so much interesting. So my job right now, Chris, is around something called ESG and CSR, corporate social responsibility and environmental social government. So basically, these are things that are the goodness level of a company, right? Companies, I think, at this point in our evolution as a society, we don't just dump things into the ocean anymore, and we don't just throw our leftover engine oil. I mean, we have legislation and things like the EPA that kind of keep us from this, but for the most part, we're all good corporate citizens. But ESG, CSR is a way to actually measure and talk about where your company's position is on the environment, on diversity, equity, inclusion, so the people side of things, and the work that you do in the communities where you operate. So as a trucking company, Chris, I spend a lot of time on the environmental side. So I'm looking at technologies and exciting things that are going to make our business greener, that's going to make us to be able to deliver freight without something as dirty as diesel fuel. In fact, I didn't even ask you before we started this, but is this just a podcast, or is there a video piece to this as well?
Well, there's video and audio.
Okay,
So if you want to show something, you can, but we have to describe it.
Okay, so I'm holding up 2 vials of liquid right now.
Mm-hmm.
The one in my right hand is petroleum diesel. In my left hand is this clear vial of something called renewable diesel. So this is not biodiesel, this is renewable diesel. It's what's called a drop-in fuel. I can put this in any one of my trucks right now without having to do any engine modifications. It doesn't invalidate my warranty. I have less soot, less engine maintenance, and 60% less greenhouse gas output than petroleum-based diesel.
Wow.
This stuff right now is in its early stages of production. It needs to be done at scale. Right now, it's available mostly in California and the Pacific Northwest. This is the thing right now that I'm most excited about, because it's a solution that I can use today in my trucks, assuming I can get it, that will allow us to deliver freight in a much cleaner, sustainable way. This is what would be a bridge to things like hydrogen powered trucks and electric trucks. There's a lot in your state of California, Chris, where y'all are playing a really leading role in the legislation that's around sort of controlling, how quickly that happens. Yeah, that's one of the most exciting things going on right now.
No, I love it. I mean, I always thought electricity was sort of like on the way to hydrogen, because isn't hydrogen like a better option, especially not just for trucks, but for everything?
It is a better option, but the problem is it takes a lot of electricity to make the hydrogen. And so for an electric truck, the most that you can put into a truck is about enough juice to run, and I'm talking about a big semi truck like what we operate, about 250 to maybe 300 miles. There's been some claims about more. I think Tesla says they've got a truck that can go 500 miles. We still haven't seen that truck, so I'm not really
sure they do.
I'm not really willing to bet that. But right now, we have a truck in our fleet that'll go 300 miles, right? Pulling a trailer full of freight. That's not the business that we're in. We haul cross country, we do long loads. And so electrification is an option for a little piece of our work, but not the major part of our work. A hydrogen powered truck will go about 7 to 8, even 900 miles. That's really the solution that we're holding out for. But the problem is, where are you going to get the hydrogen? And the big joke in the hydrogen market, Chris, is hydrogen for the last 20 years has been 5 years away. And it just keeps...
It's like AI, right? It's always, it keeps getting pushed out.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because it takes a lot of electricity to extract. Electrolysis is the process where you extract hydrogen from water, and that's very electricity intensive. And if you're in a state that's creating hydrogen from electricity that's not necessarily green or renewable, then you're really not gaining anything. You're using coal-powered electricity to extract hydrogen to run a truck that probably could have been operated just as well under diesel from the environment's perspective.
Wow, I didn't even know that. I didn't.
It's really weedy, and I'm sure your listeners may not be interested in the nuances of that. But it's exciting stuff for us, because our goal ultimately one day is to have, say, for example, Washington State, where hydro is running all the time. 60% of their energy comes from hydroelectric. Well, when everybody goes to bed at night and turns the lights off, and everything sort of slows down, a great way to spend some of the excess electricity is to produce hydrogen at scale at night with all this extra electricity. And so, there are a lot of really things that we have to look forward to as a country as it relates to these two new technologies.
That's really interesting because I didn't realize it required that much electricity to create hydrogen. So you almost need like a nuclear plant to create electricity to create hydrogen or something like that. I don't know.
It's interesting, Chris. I just got back from a week in Iceland, which is a beautiful country. I want to tell people, don't ever go there. Don't visit, because I don't want people to find out about it. And
you don't want to spoil it, right?
Because I'm going back. But Iceland is 98% renewable electricity because of the massive geothermal and hydroelectric that they have. I think the other 2% are the diesel generators that they have to run hospitals and data centers, if whatever the power ever goes out. So here you've got a company that has incredible energy resources, and they have excess electricity. Their electricity is super cheap. They have electric cars all over the place. Well, Iceland is a great place to produce hydrogen at scale, right? Because you've got enough electricity to do it. You got plenty of water close by. So, electricity is something that, they could be in the hydrogen business and be the number one hydrogen output, country in the world. And maybe they will.
That's interesting. So you would be able to ship the hydrogen elsewhere. So if they produce it, and
or have a hydrogen tanker. Those things run on this nasty stuff called bunker fuel, which is like a really nasty version of diesel.
That sounds awful. I didn't realize that there were all these different various grades of fuel.
Oh yeah. They have lots of grades of fuel, including my new renewable diesel.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's an exciting.
So what do you have to
business.
do to create that stuff? What do you need to do to create that stuff? The new stuff.
So, it's interesting, and I'm still in the early stages of researching it, but it's biodiesel is made from a lot of the same stuff that this is made out of. So think about cooking grease, and actually with this stuff, you can actually use wood chips and animal excrement. I know that sounds terrible,
wow.
But it is. And
well, that's the stuff we need to make it out of, because it's waste.
Solve like product. 8 problems at once, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
why stop at one?
All the big Philips is doing it, Shell's doing it, Exxon is doing it. There's a company called Neste that's doing it. And from what I understand, getting what's called the food stock that's required, the raw material for it, is not a problem. It just requires a massive investment in a refinery that's completely different than a petroleum-based refinery. So they're building these things right now. I was kind of on a personal note, Chris, I'm a big outdoors guy. So I have this Sprinter van that is decked out for outdoor adventure travel. In fact, if any of your listeners are on Instagram, they can follow me at Chad the Van. But I was in Chad the Van in Northern California last summer. I'm in Eureka, California. If you've ever been there, it's this little hippie town.
Oh, I love Eureka. Eureka's great.
Yeah. I pull into a gas station and I pull up to the pump, and the only thing they have is this stuff called renewable diesel. I'm not supposed to put biodiesel in the Sprinter. And I'm standing there looking at it, and this guy pulls up in a truck and he says, "You need to use that stuff. That's the best stuff you can ever put in your car." I'm like, well, all right, if that guy says it, then I'm going to do it. Best tank.
Some random guy pulls up. I love it.
Yeah, but he had a much nicer vehicle than I did. So I used this stuff, best tank of gas I ever ran through my vehicle. So
nice.
That's my decarbonization sort of speech that I'll give your listeners.
So where are we now on the scale? Like we're moving towards more sustainability. We're still like at the leading edge of this, right? There's still so much more that we can do, right?
Yeah, there's a lot more we can do. And listen, I have a love-hate relationship with your state of California because you guys are incredibly progressive. And I don't mean like right, left progressive, even though you are progressive in that area, but you're very progressive in setting standards and setting goals and initiatives that have a lot of really great potential for emissions and air quality and water quality and things like that. I don't necessarily always agree with your governor and some of the approaches that he takes to things, but I love big goals, right? The goal that he set for no new gas-powered cars after 2030. I personally don't think that's ever going to happen. But
I doubt it too.
Goal, right? Because if you don't have a goal, there's nothing to work towards. So, your state is doing a lot that you should be really proud of. and you guys have set a lot of really great initiatives. It's a hard state for us to do business in because some of those regulations are very onerous and hard to work through. But I'm, as much as a capitalist as I am, I do feel like the government is in this unique position to put pressure and regulations on for-profit companies like us, Chris, where it forces us to be innovative. It forces us to do things. If you go back and look at the history of our country, some of the biggest innovations that we have done as a society have been through government involvement, either through government investment in things like the early days of aviation, government investment in things like coming up with a smallpox vaccine, government investment when it comes to space and aeronautic technology that has not just put a man on the moon, but has also generated products and solutions through testing in space that have been able to help all of us. So I think the government is in this unique position right now to play a role to help prop up some of these industries that maybe need help, like solar, or this renewable diesel stuff is really expensive. And so if they can make that cost at parity with diesel, then it would be something that is much easier for us to use. So as much as a libertarian type guy as I can be, I do feel like the government plays a very necessary role in innovation. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, you can't be innovative or creative unless you have restrictions, right? Because if you don't have any restrictions, you just lie around and watch Netflix all day, right? So you got to figure out some way of getting through those. And then secondly, I don't know if you've read the book Loonshots, but he talks about how a lot of the innovations that the governments develop these innovations because the incentive structure has not been financial. Because if you think about it, some of the most innovative stuff is not really profitable yet. It never starts out profitable. It eventually gets to it at one point. So if you take profitability out of the equation, then sometimes you get some really amazing innovations that aren't there. And the government's perfect for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add something to that. And I'm not trying to look distracted as I'm searching around my desk for this book, but I just finished Bill Gates's book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And so in this book, he talks a lot about environment. He has a lot of science and numbers and metrics that I think your listeners would be really interested in, because a lot of people have love-hate relationship with Bill Gates, as I do, but I really believe in a lot of the stuff he talks about in this book. But for companies and states and countries that have these net zero initiatives, most of those initiatives are depending on technologies that have yet to be invented. And Bill Gates has this massive fund that he uses to invest in some of the craziest ideas you've ever heard of. Fortunately, he's a billionaire several times over, and he doesn't have to actually have any of these things actually be successful, but they are learning, they're experimenting with things, they're doing some really interesting, very leading edge stuff. And some of it actually does have government funding, but I love his approach to the future and the way he's thinking about how investment, technology, innovation will play a role in that.
Yeah, we have to continue doing crazy things because we don't know what's going to survive, what's going to work, right? I mean, we have to experiment. 10,000 ways of trying a light bulb before we find the right one.
Yeah,
right,
right there in your state of California too.
So, when I think about the future of trucks, I think about, do you remember Logan? Do you ever watch that movie, Wolverine?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Do you remember there's a scene where an autonomous truck like whips by on the freeway, and it just like has this horn and goes off. There's no cab, there's nothing. It's just like a box with a slot, and it's an autonomous truck, and it just whizzes by real fast on the freeway. That in my mind is like the future of autonomous trucks. Is that where you're seeing it too, or are they totally off in that vision?
Man, we could spend the rest of our time talking about autonomous trucks. There's some really interesting things about that. So, what's interesting, if you have a truly autonomous truck, some of the savings allegedly can come from, well, I don't have to put a seat in it anymore. I don't really need a steering wheel. I don't need a passenger seat. I don't need for there to be, well, maybe you still need an air conditioner and heater because there's a lot of technology that needs to be taken care of. But there's just a lot of things that you can strip out of a truck. Like to your point, like in the movie, you don't even really need a cab the way a traditional cab is designed. There's a company, I think it's a Norwegian company called Enride, that basically has what you just described. It's like a trailer, an autonomous trailer. Now it's electric and it's only made to go short distances, but there's nothing pulling it. It's just a robotic trailer. So, we are the company that I work for. We have, partnered with 2 of the 6 autonomous providers that, we think there's going to be a lot of consolidation in that space, but I've ridden in all of the trucks except for one. It is spooky to ride in a Class 8 truck pulling a 53-foot trailer fully loaded with 60 to 80,000 pounds of product, Chris, and to get on an interstate, to navigate between cars, to have it execute passing, to get off the interstate, to make unprotected turns, to go through stoplights, to navigate traffic. It is the craziest thing. I know that a lot of your listeners are probably very future minded and have Teslas and say, Matt, big deal. My car does that and I'm about to hop in it and go to lunch. But to have a truck do that is just amazing. And a lot of people think that, an autonomous truck is just about replacing drivers because we have a driver shortage, because drivers have high turnover rates. And that's part of it. But there's a huge sustainability play to it as well, because an electric truck, now that it can be on the road for 22 hours a day, because you have to pull it over and refuel it every once in a while. You don't have what's called hours of service limitations. So with drivers, you can only be on the road for, roughly 11 hours a day or so. Now this truck can go all day long. You can slow it down to this magical speed of about 63 miles per gallon or miles per hour, which is the speed that the aerodynamics of the trucks are the most efficient. So you can get about 10% efficiency gain from the operation of the truck because you got longer for it to get to where it's going. So you can drive it slower. So you have efficiency gains, you have safety gains, which, again, is really interesting when you start peeling back the layer and looking at all of the decision the truck makes in order to do its job and to come across really complicated situations. I've got, somebody's trying to cut me off. I got a busload of children on this side, and a van full of nuns on this side, and what do I do?
It's like a trolley problem right there.
Yeah. So and it's amazing to watch how the engineers are designing this technology to sort of handle these really complicated situations that are no different than if a human is in there. So there's a lot of reasons for autonomous technology to be something that we're really pursuing. We tell our drivers right now, if you're 21 years old, which is the minimum age to drive a Class 8 truck, if you start with us tomorrow and you want to retire from our company as a truck driver, you will have a job. And it has nothing to do with the number of autonomous trucks that may or may not be rolling around, because there's so much freight and so much need for drivers. You do not need to be worried about replacing your job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're not there yet. Although, if you ask me, I wish we were there, because the way people drive nowadays, I think driving is not a human thing. People should not be driving. Human beings, they're just too, emotional or complicated or something to be able to drive properly.
Yeah, let me look at the drive. No, my wife's not here. Yeah, like my wife. Sometimes she's a wonderful lady and a beautiful surgeon and a beautiful woman, but not the best driver. So and that's not a gender.
I cannot wait for autonomous vehicles to be everywhere.
I know. So it's funny because this is one thing I want to talk about just a little bit, since you've given me a little bit of latitude. Sustainability is interesting because as consumers, we all have way too much stuff. When I was in Iceland, one of the things that was really interesting to me, Chris, was that the cars were smaller, houses were smaller, people just had less stuff. And when you think about in America, we're trying to cram, we're forcing companies to be sustainable based on our current levels of consumption. And when you and I were growing up, because we're probably roughly the same age, our parents was like, hey, turn the lights off before you leave the house, shut those windows.
Conservation.
We did all this stuff because we had to, and we just don't think like that anymore. And so when you think about things like sustainability and things that innovation, like, do we all need these big giant cars? My neighbor, I'm looking at his big truck and he's got this big Ford Raptor across the street. He's never even put anything in the back of it. He's got this giant V8 gas guzzling vehicle. So I just think that, there's so much innovation that can allow us to do things like ride share and car share or truck share. I think all of your listeners, we need to think differently about the future as it relates to our consumption habits, because we're all really bad citizens. Even me, and I like to think I'm pretty aware of it and do a good job of it.
Well, around here, my oldest son actually doesn't drive. He just Ubers everywhere. So he doesn't he doesn't own a car. He's not interested in owning a car. And I don't know what's going to happen if he ever moves to a more rural area. He'll probably have to, get his license and do that. But you can survive in the larger cities and even in the suburbs without needing to own an automobile. So and especially here where it's ridiculously expensive to own anything, they're renting out homes with $800 a month bunk beds.
Oh wow!
So yeah, people are being forced by the costs, at least here, to live in smaller spaces and have less stuff. And of course, this whole there was a minimalist movement, say like mid 2000s or something like that, and we've seen that run out of steam a little bit. But I think we need to go back to that. I think you're right.
I agree 100%. I really think we do. In fact, around here, I've got a book on minimalism that I just looked through.
I've got hundreds of books on minimalism. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. No, but the definition of minimalism, this guy that wrote this book says it's not about like having 3 forks and 4 pairs of socks and 2 pairs of underwear. If you don't need it, just don't get it. I spoke at a conference a few weeks ago at my alma mater, the University of Georgia, where I went to college, and I hadn't been back there in 20 years, Chris. And I go into this bookstore, and right there in front rows, this cool Athens, Georgia, University of Georgia T-shirt with this beautiful organic cotton that was soft,
nice,
my perfect size. And I'm thinking, I'm getting that $32 T-shirt. And I picked it up and I was like, I have 100 T-shirts. I don't need this T-shirt. Like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I just don't need this, because, you multiply that decision over 1,000 things that happen on any given week. And no wonder you have a family of 3 that has a 3,000 square foot house, because you put all this crap.
Yeah, but aren't you by not buying that T-shirt, you're basically digging into your own business, because wasn't there logistics required to move that T-shirt from wherever it was made?
Let me tell you, man, there's so much. There's so much truck freight to be moved right now. But we're like that with food too. This is really, I probably should. Well, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyway. On my desk, I keep a anatomical. I got this from one of my wife's mail order catalogs that has like anatomical sort of like things that you can buy. This what I'm holding is 1 pound of human fat.
And, ew, gross.
And I have this because it reminds me of the excess that we all have in the way that we eat and the way that we consume food. I'm a little bit of I try to be a health nut, but sustainability is not just in the things that we buy, it's also the things that we feed ourselves. So I actually just spoke at a conference yesterday in Austin, Texas, and you know how I got around? I used my Uber app to use these Lime scooters, right? To go to all the things that I had to do, right? I was going to Uber somewhere. I'm like, well, I could just hop on that scooter, and I use my app to pay for the rides. And yeah, innovation. You and I are in a really interesting space where we get to think about the future and actually promote some of these things that really probably need some promotion because they're just too good to be true in a lot of ways.
Well, I think that bothers me is that you were talking about how good governments are in some ways because they help to drive forward innovation. But at the same time, you remember when the Segway first came out, it was banned in San Francisco, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's like the center of innovation is banning this really innovative, eminently help the sustainability movement device because of safety issues or whatever. I'm not sure why they banned it. But it's almost like it goes both ways. It's like on the one hand, yes, we want innovative solutions that drive this, but on the other hand, we don't want it to be too innovative because this could happen. It's almost like you have to be in some kind of a sweet spot. Because I prefer that we just like go full bore and see if the stuff works before we decided to ban it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I think the funny thing about the Segway is the downside. Like there is always a downside to most good things in life, right? Is that these things litter the streets and they're horrible to look at, and people leave them all over the place. And it, as much as convenient as the scooters were, they certainly don't look very good. And
wait a minute, isn't that the whole point? Leave it wherever you want.
I know, but there's got to be a better way to do it. Like here's a little stall, on every other street corner or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we're trained. I don't know about you, but I was trained to always put things back, right? Like after you do the gardening, put it back. After you shop, you take the shopping cart back.
Yeah, clean your plate. Don't hit your sister. Yeah, that was a whole different world.
Put everything away. No, you're right. I mean, but aren't they? And little sort of gremlins come out at night and pick them all up and take them back to recharge, right? Isn't that what happens?
That's right. That's exactly right. Some of the other interesting things I'm seeing. It's funny because when we talk about technology, we think about computers and software and, apps and phones and things like that. I think we've talked a little bit about autonomous trucks. We've talked a little bit about, decarbonization of freight, innovation and technology. Technology is this vial of renewable diesel. This is the end product, but there's a lot of work that went to get there. There are, AI is something that's interesting. We've been experimenting with what's called robotic process automation, which is ways to do repetitive tasks using software. It's like really advanced macros on steroids, but we've used that as a way to really simplify the jobs of some of the people that had these really sort of frustrating, error-prone jobs of just keying in massive amounts of data. I have a long runway to look at products and ideas and even talk to my competitors in some cases to really come up with some great ideas and bring them back and, see if the company, see if the organization, has a tolerance to maybe test some of these things. I do have a bad reputation in the company sometimes when they see me come like, oh, here comes McClelland. He's going to tell me why I'm not doing my job right, or he's going to tell me how to do my job better. And in the innovation space, you have to be careful about that. You have to be careful that you're just not telling everybody why they suck at what they do and how you've come up with an idea to do it better. And you're going to give them an idea, but you're not actually going to do it. You expect them to do it. And so
here's this guy who comes from the land of make-believe, right? That's right.
You have to be careful in this space. And I try not to get excited over everything I see, but there's just a lot of really interesting things going on. Of course, you live in the epicenter of all of it there in the Bay Area.
I don't know. I would say that it comes from everywhere. I've seen things come from. There's lots of other centers, especially Austin, where you're seeing all sorts of cool stuff happening.
Yep. Austin's cool. A lot of you guys and girls in California are moving to places like Nashville and Chattanooga. I mean, I got a phone. This is really interesting. I got a LinkedIn request from this young lady because she had a title very similar to mine. She worked for a big software company out in the Bay Area. And she said, hey, I saw your, I saw your job description. We do some of the same stuff. But she said, more importantly, my husband and I are thinking about moving to Chattanooga, and we're actually going to be there next week. Do you think that we could get together, take you to dinner? And I looked at her and I looked at her husband's profile. I'm like, well, they look like normal people, right? And they don't look like they're trying to sell me something, which I get a lot of people on LinkedIn, Chris, that are trying to sell me something. And we got together, lovely couple. She had a job where she could work anywhere, as did he. And you're going to laugh at this because it's funny to me, not so much funny to you, but she was describing different places in town that she was interested in Chattanooga after she visited. And I said, well, some of these places that you're talking about are like really expensive and others aren't. And she said, well, is 2 million enough? And by your standards, like 2 million ain't going to get you nothing. But by Chattanooga standards, that'll get you a lot. So sometimes I'm not.
2 million will get you a tear down shack in Palo Alto or something like that.
Yeah, well, 2 million will give you a really nice place here. But
well, you know what I'm waiting for? Autonomous tiny homes. So I can just live in the place and it'll take me back and forth to work or wherever I want to go, and it'll just go park in some place and recharge itself overnight. And I mean, I'm waiting for that. When's that going to happen?
Yeah,
are you guys working on that?
Work is really interesting. COVID, I think, has really forced us to really pay attention to the way we work, and I think we were able to prove in a very short amount of time that it is possible to do a lot of remote work. I do see a downside to it where we have become less creative in some situations. We've become a little bit more. I think personally that we don't negotiate, we don't sort of communicate as well. And, when you sort of operate in a silo all the time, I just think that there's something to face-to-face communication, but I'm also a huge advocate of working remotely. You're doing it right now, as I can see from your home office. I'm doing it right now as I'm doing it from my home office. I do think that there's a lot of efficiency and innovation that comes from being able to have your own workspace and all of my books and things that are right here. I feel like I'm more creative, that I can get more done. So yeah, the future, there's some days I don't leave the house. Do you ever not leave the house for like?
Oh, all the time. All the time. And I'm like, yeah. I got to leave. I got to go for a walk or something. I just got to clear my head.
I know. Fortunately, I live near a trail, so I like to do a lot of trail running. So I'll force myself to leave and, listen to an audiobook or a podcast or something.
Yeah. Well, we do need to spend time outside of our offices.
Yeah. So
it helps I wanted to ask a little bit about the other part of like, are you just mostly in the trucking space, or are there other aspects of logistics that
We do
that
have
you're covering?
warehouse management, where we operate millions of square feet of warehouse on behalf of some of larger consumer brands that you would know about. Right now, the majority of our revenue comes from trucking, but we are trying to expand out because we want to be a full service 3PL that's not just a trucking company.
So I've heard rumors that the supply chain is a lot more fragile than it actually. I feel that it probably actually is. I mean, what's your take? I mean, is it pretty solid? Like if there was some disaster to occur, another COVID or whatever, do you think we'd be able to weather the storm?
So it's an interesting question. I mean, just if your listeners, if anybody's buying a new car right now, everybody pays MSRP
Good
because
luck.
yeah, good luck because the cars and a lot of times the reason the cars aren't available, it's not because they don't exist. Like there are a lot of BMWs out there right now that are missing one chip. And the supply chain is the reason why it's not there. Now it's not so much the supply chain as it relates to the trucking of that chip from maybe the port to wherever the manufacturing plant is, but it's much deeper than that. It's about all the different supply chain that was involved with the creation of that chip before it even gets put on a ship to come to America, to go to the manufacturing plant, to get put into the BMW so that it can go to the dealership and end up in your hands. And so obviously there's a lot of steps there. So any one of those steps gets out of whack and the whole thing kind of cascades downwards. So, it is very fragile. But I think I think that making the supply chain shorter sometimes is part of the answer. But yeah, it is fragile. And I feel like when you think about how complicated things done, there's a book around here I have that it traces every component of an iPhone and the number of touch points that the supply chain plays in that phone being finally assembled and ending up at the Apple store, assuming that's where you go to get it. It's unbelievable that thing actually ever gets made, and ends up in the store when you look at the number of touch points of that. And that just shows you how great technology works and how great people are and how smart companies are to make these processes work. Yeah, it is a little scary, but I think we're smart people and we can figure this stuff out.
Actually, if you think about it, I mean, that's how software works too, because every piece of software requires an API from some other piece of software. So everything's running on AWS, which runs over this or this. So it's almost like our entire world is so interconnected and networked. If you drop a piece here and there, and a lot of times you don't have an easy to switch to backup for what you're looking for, because I think that happens in supply chain, that happens in software, that happens almost everywhere. We're almost like we're not really built. We're built to get the damn thing out the door, but not to keep it resilient in case there's some kind of a disaster.
Amen. And I know we've kind of been all over the place, but I'm sitting here talking to you, looking at the Starship Enterprise, which I think is what that is behind you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that like a 3D printed one or is that like a model of one?
No. It's just a model.
Okay. But I mean, I look at that and I think, that's the future. That's what we're talking about, right? Is the future. And how far off is something like that? How far off is space travel? I don't mean like Musk going to Mars, but I'm talking about beyond that. It is interesting because when I look at how innovation continues to happen, it's almost incremental, like Moore's law. It seems like it's growing faster and faster. So when I look at that enterprise, or I think about, beam me up and all that sort of stuff, it may not happen in our lifetime, Chris, but it's going to happen at some point.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you think about replicators,
if we don't all
they came up with came up with replicators in Star Trek: The Next Generation, and now we have 3D printers. I mean, we don't call them replicators, but they're 3D printers. And as you can actually see the technology heading in that direction. I mean, obviously for me, it's not getting there fast enough, but I'm sure it's the same for most of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about the future. It is think like a futurist. 10 years from now, it is the year 2032. What's the world going to be like? What's your space going to be like? Where will we be in 10 years?
I think in 10 years, we're going to have certain parts of the country that are going to have autonomous vehicles delivering freight. It's probably going to be in what's called a hub-to-hub model. So there'll be like a yard of trucks very close to the exit on an interstate. We're going to pick up a truck. We're going to pick up a trailer. An autonomous truck is going to pick up a trailer. It's going to hop on the interstate. It's going to drive maybe, say, from like Houston to Phoenix. It's going to get off the interstate. There'll be a yard right there. It'll drop that trailer, and then a human will maybe do that final delivery. I think we're going to start seeing sections of the country that are very prime for that level of autonomous. Is it going to be 10,000 trucks? Is it going to be 100,000 trucks? I would probably hedge to say it's going to be closer to, something like, 10 to 50,000 trucks, because I think that already the technology will do it today, but there's a lot of regulatory hurdles that have to be overcome, and insurance hurdles. And I think the first one will probably hit the road in about 3 years. And then I think it'll start scaling up from there. But 10 years from now, I think we'll see a substantial part of that. I think that we're going to see a lot more consumer-based electric vehicles. I kind of have a love-hate relationship. I have right here on my desk.
That's your third love-hate relationship, by the way. I'm keeping track.
Yeah. My pre-order for a Tesla Cybertruck that I placed.
I got one too. What my big problem with EVs is the look. They gotta look like that.
I know. Well, but there's not enough electricity to do the things that our politicians are telling us need to be done. There's just not. And it sounds really good and it's a great talking point, but our grid by today's standards just won't support it.
I read that the other day. They said the maximum is 25 million vehicles or something like that. I thought that's ridiculous. I mean, what do we have, like 300 million?
Yeah, when I drove my van through California last year, I was up in the on 101 up north, the Avenue of the Giants, and I pull over and there's a Tesla charging station with these diesel generators running them, kind of behind these fences in the background, or they were propane generators, but because they were quieter. But that's kind of like people want to eat sausage, they just don't want to know how it's made. I feel like people are like that with their electric vehicles, right? So I'm really bullish on that, and I hope that that's a good answer. I hope there's hydrogen vehicles for consumers. I think that there's going to be a lot more automation in the industry. I think that there's still some low-hanging fruit that we still haven't grabbed yet, just-in-time delivery and some other things that can really kind of shorten the supply chain. I really have a lot of passion for sustainability, and I think there's going to be a lot more solutions to make the warehouses a lot greener, to make them more, if you have nighttime operations going on with robots that that do picking, you don't always have to have the lights on in order for that to happen. So there's all kinds of things that I think, will still be done in 10 years. But at the end of the day, are we ever going to get quicker than next day delivery? I don't know, man. I don't think so. And I would probably question whether or not that's a good idea in the first place, right? I mean, it's one thing to want your burrito right now, as I have the Chipotle ESG report, which I read a lot of. It's right here on my desk. That sounds really good right now. But, I think we need to be able to plan our lives a little bit more carefully, where we don't need things tomorrow, and all of the cost and the waste associated with the logistics involved with this crazy sort of I gotta have it right now mentality that we all have, right? And Amazon's partially guilty of that because they've set this expectation.
Oh yeah, they're totally guilty of it.
Like I'm looking over here at my laser printer and I'm thinking, okay, I'm down to 8% or 10%, 18% on one of my cartridges, right? Well, I know that I can order one tomorrow and it'll show up. I'm like, I'm just gonna let it, or I could order one now, let it take 7 days to get here, which is probably about the time I'll need it. So I think that there's, I think that part of the future involves us having a little bit of change to our habits as well.
Well, speaking of that, I mean,
and if I was king for a day, the first thing I would do, cardboard boxes. That's my pet peeve. Cardboard boxes and Christmas trees. We got to figure out a way to not use so much cardboard. And I'm not a bah humbug person, but we can't be cutting down trees to put in our house for 30 days for a holiday. And then when we're done, we just toss these things back out on the street. That just seems like a terrible waste of a natural resource that we need more, not less of.
Oh, see, I got to unmute myself. I think all of this stuff is great, but it requires humans to change, which is really hard. It must be better if we could just get our machines to do it for us. So, for example, the example that you were saying with your printer, I mean, couldn't your printer be set to automatically realize, wait a minute, based on what you've got here and how much ink you've got left, this is going to be done in 7 days. Therefore, I will order it now for you. So it will help us with our sustainability goals by doing things for us and making it more convenient for us.
Yeah,
take it off our plate.
Yeah, there's early stages of that. I mean, think about Amazon Subscribe and Save. I'll offer you this product at a less price if I can automatically ship it to you on a schedule once every 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it is. That's the way I get my AA batteries, on a Subscribe and Save. So, I think, I think that, and I know we're talking about the future, and part of that is technology and innovation, but I feel like that as people, and I try to teach my 16-year-old this, the world doesn't exist for you. You have to play a part in the world. That the definition of sustainability is the ability for us to meet our needs today without infringing on the next generation's ability to meet theirs. That's the most basic definition of sustainability. And I think that we all, in order for that to happen, today, you, me, your listeners, we all need to be playing a much better role in the way we look at that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's like, I feel like we're the parents of the world, and we have to treat it better.
You know what? I feel like this old man, like, slow down, you kids. I feel like I'm this angry old man right now on your podcast.
Well, one of my sons is actually
guys preaching like a bad television pastor.
One of my sons has this old car, and he drives slow because the cost of gas is so high. So he drives purposely slowly, to save the gas. And I'm like, does that really work? But I guess it helps him, right? It helps everyone. Anyways, this has been great. Thanks so much for coming on. Can you tell us what's the best way to contact you if somebody wants to?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. In fact, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff related to sustainability, but I try to be very thoughtful and intentional with the things that I do, and they're not just like every other thing that I read off of the magazines and the periodicals that I follow on a regular basis. I think you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. And then as long as you're not trying to sell me something, I generally accept your I accept the connection. And if you send me a note, I generally reply. Covenant Logistics. So, it's the company I work for. You can find me on the website. You can find me on social media at Chad the Van.
I'm signing up. And if anybody's interested in moving from the Bay Area to Chattanooga, talk to you, right?
That's right. And exactly. And what's funny, the girl that they ended up moving here, I found them a house. She was pregnant, and I found her a doctor, which was my wife. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, nice. That's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Hey, it's so nice to meet you, Chris. I appreciate you reaching out.
Great talking with you. Thanks.